Alright Jeep fans, this is going to be a whole video showing you how I repaired a bunch of little issues on this 96 XJ. So this is the night we went and picked it up, and you can hear it rattling as Alex is driving away. The exhaust was really shanty, and that was the first thing we noticed.
Oh, the Jeep. Way cool.
Besides the leaking exhaust and the rattling, it drove really good at first. I also noticed that the engine temperature gauge on the top left and the oil pressure gauge on the top right weren't working, which bothered me. The engine itself, though, ran like a top, super clean, responsive, didn't leak. All of the gaskets seemed to be sealing really well. It was just a very clean, well-maintained engine. Being a former Forest Service vehicle, this thing was definitely taken care of. Then I got it up to speed and noticed this really bad bucking issue. I wasn't really sure what was causing that issue, but it was something I was definitely taking note of. I went over to the car wash, cleaned the car out because it was a little bit dirty on the inside, just made it a little bit more comfortable, looked it over a little bit more, and then I noticed something when I was pulling on the e-brake at low speed.
I think these rear brakes are hurting, but let's take a look and really know for sure. I pulled the e-brake at low speed to see what it felt like, and it felt like all of a sudden you'd reach a point where the shoes just kind of caught and grabbed inside the drum, and in my head I'm like, what the hell could that be? And no shit, there are no pad material left on these at all. It's literally metal on metal, but it doesn't look like it was even contacting because it's still rusty. I'm not even seeing clean metal, but there is no contact going on here. There's no shoe material. Wow. And here on the passenger side, just a little bit of material left on these shoes, but it was getting way hot because this side was doing all the braking for the rear side, so much that it wasn't even touching on the driver's side.
It's pretty bogus. I've never seen that before. I know the previous owners had a lot of work done to the car. They definitely had the clutch and things in the front suspension replaced and the steering components, but those rear brakes were completely shot. So I was really glad to get under there, get rid of those shoes that were gone, and replace all the stuff that was really bad. And here you can see, after I rebuilt it, looking all nice and fresh. I also figured out what was causing the oil pressure gauge to not work. It was just a little sending unit there off the back of the block. You can see here they had a single pin connector one in there, which is incorrect. It actually needed a 2-pin. Once I got that installed, it was working like new.
I've successfully fixed the busted temperature gauge and oil pressure gauge.
The connector was loose on the wiring going to the temperature gauge.
Yes.
And once I fixed that, it worked as well.
Oh, it's got good oil pressure too. Like 50 pounds. Hell yeah. Oh man, awesome. Oil pressure gauge, temp gauge, rear brakes redone. Now all that's left to do, the big stuff, is this crappy exhaust system. It's gotta go. Get rid of this thing. And then we will repaint underneath and make it look nice. Hell yeah.
The next thing I decided to tackle was the odor inside of the cab of the car. It was just so overpowered with this coffee that had been spilled from the previous owners. It was all underneath the passenger seat. So I took the time one weekend, I pulled out the seats, did a whole bunch of vacuuming. There was a lot of dog hair in the back too from their dogs. You know, this is a 28-year-old vehicle, so that carpet probably hadn't been cleaned in a very long time, if not ever. Cleaned up all the stuff, even at the bottom of where the seats mounted to the floor. You can see here once it was pulled out, all the stuff that was there. So I got myself a little bit of a cleaner vacuum, and I took some time and just scrubbed it for hours, and it really wound up coming out a lot prettier looking, and it smelled so much better. To be honest, it smelled pretty much brand new, so it was a very successful little endeavor. You can see here all the seat belts, all the little wear on the door panels, just gunk and grime from people's arms and stuff. So this is the crap that I was pulling out of that carpet. I must have done that like 20 times. It was so nasty, but here it is after. It looks so much better, like I said. And most importantly, it smelled fresh and clean in there, and I was actually comfortable driving around. I was able to get a little bit of stuff out of the seat belts, door panels cleaned up really nicely, just overall made it feel at home in there. So this was a big win. I was really glad I did this. And once again, here's a look at what it was before. So that was one thing that I was super proud of. So after that, I got the seats put back in. I put the floor mats back in the car, drove it around a little bit more, and it was really a much more enjoyable experience, like I said. Beyond this, we decided to go and tackle the exhaust issues. 100% sure if this was original, but it may very well have been the original catalytic converter and maybe a newer muffler, but still completely rotted from years of salt and grime on the road, and it was just rattling internally, and it was time to go. Cut it, and I got the muffler and the catalytic converter out of there and got a whole new setup to put it in.
It was this freaking muffler making all this rattly, annoying sound driving around. Yep. Away with you now. Putting in some Flowmaster Super 40. This $150, I forget what brand it was, catalytic converter. It's supposed to be better than the other Amazon things. And then some mandrel bent 2-inch pipe. A lot better looking than what was. And what do you know? Cat's got some rattle to it too. So away this one will go. Garbage. All the innards are all screwed up, and this thing was having this issue where at high RPM and higher load, it just kind of bogs, basically like loses all sorts of power. And I was kind of curious if there was something clogging it up in the exhaust system. If not, I was going to look into maybe an issue with the fuel pump. But this right here might be the fix, and if anything, at least that eliminates all that damn rattling. Junk. Hell yeah, out with the old and in with the new. It's going to be so much better.
So it was a nice cold January night. I didn't care. I got out there in the driveway, pulled out the welder, decided to go ahead and get the catalytic converter and the muffler plugs together. Those two were not from the same kit, so they didn't match up completely, and that's why I chose to weld them all the way around. For the rest of the exhaust from the muffler back, that came as a single kit with a Flowmaster muffler and then the mandrel bent piping. So those were easy to put together with the U-bolts. So did a little bit of welding, had a little bit of fun. Got this thing looking much better. I always love using this Adelphi headlamp out in the driveway or when I'm working underneath the car. Super bright, the battery lasts a long time. If you guys want to grab one, look up in the top right for that link. Welded it up and painted along the weld so it doesn't rust. Now we can install. Right, I'm getting the pipe finalized underneath the car, making it so that it looks nice in here and it's not hitting against the sleeve spring. We're gonna have to cut it obviously so it's not sticking out looking stupid. Just had to pull out the trailer hitch. That was a pain in the ass. Those bolts are in there really good. Put them back to keep the threads protected in case you ever use it again, but it's over there. It's out now. So the rest of the exhaust, all these little U-bands loosened so I can just kind of mess with its orientation and kind of keep wiggling it around. But it's pretty close. Just gonna secure it as we go here and then it'll be done. All right guys, it is done being welded. Looks pretty good in there. There it is. All the way through. I wasn't able to salvage the old O2 sensor from the catalytic converter because it was just rusted into there, and plus it was kind of shot anyway. So took the mini bike up to Napa, grabbed a new one. I always use my mini bike for little fun runs like that. Just getting in the O2 sensor, and this job is done. We can actually crank it up and hear it for the first time. And I don't think it's going to sound like incredible in the sense of performance because it's just a little 4-liter, but you know what? It's not going to rattle and make a bunch of stupid noise like it used to, and that alone is a win in my opinion. And with that, we are done. O2 sensor is connected. I'll probably zip tie that so it doesn't pop out. That's it, guys. The new exhaust is in. Cut the tip. I think it looks pretty good right there. Now we gotta crank it up and see what it sounds like. Hell yeah. Honestly sounds about the same as it used to, maybe a little throatier, but remove the sound of all the rattly nastiness that was going on inside both the muffler and the cat. So I am very happy. All in all, a lot of work, but she sounds really good. Another thing too, it's definitely more responsive off the light. Through the gears, it's not lagging like it was before. Got a lot more acceleration. Feels pretty good. Hell yeah. Still doing the thing where it gets to 70 and pretty much bogs down and kicks out. Yeah, right there. I don't know if you could hear it. It just fell on its face. So it wasn't the exhaust causing that to happen. Maybe it's the fuel pump. So we're going to further investigate that. We'll test fuel pressure up at the rail, and then maybe either that or fuel filter or something like that is causing it to have a disconnect right there. And then it was finally time to tackle this weird stalling bucking issue. Alright, so in the continuation of trying to figure out why this thing is cutting out and choking at 70 miles an hour, we're going to test our fuel pressures. The one at Napa was the wrong size fitting over here. Didn't line up on the fuel rail, so now we're at O'Reilly's. It looks like we've got a number of different options, so hopefully this will work. Okay, let's try it again. This time we've got a proper size fitting. This fitting should be very fitting for the job. Oh yeah, we've got great fuel pressure. 50 psi. So it is not the fuel pump. What do you know? Okay, we gotta continue searching somewhere else. See if there's a change in fuel pressure when we rev it up. Since it's not the fuel pump, and obviously there is no disruption in the fuel system, I'm guessing the fuel filter is not causing a blockage either, even though I'm still going to replace that. So now I'm thinking maybe it's ignition related. So all the plugs look really new on it. I think the previous owner just had those done. The wires don't look terrible. Check them over for condition. They don't seem to have any sort of cuts or nicks where they're losing spark. But then again, you would think if it was having that kind of issue under load, it would do it at different speeds too. The coil looks like it could be original. So for $50, I grabbed myself a new one, and we're gonna slap this thing in there and see if that doesn't solve the issue.
So this second bolt is being a real pain in the butt because it's really hard to reach it over there. So I'm actually just gonna connect the new one, just let it kind of hang right here. Nothing should hit into it or do anything, and we'll go take a test drive. Okay, it just dived down there, you can see. So I think we're probably at the same issue that it's been. We'll see here in a second. Yeah, it just cut out again. It's still doing it. So it wasn't the coil. Maybe it's the other O2 sensor. I don't know. Ignition coil was not the problem. More to figure out, I guess. I don't know. Could it be this throttle plate? Could it be the other O2 sensor? Could it be some other sensor? Something is making this thing just cut out. Don't know what yet. I'll point out my wisdom prevailed. Instead of fighting this tight space to get this one little bolt off here and wasting all this time getting it off, putting a new one on, to then find out it was fine and then putting the old one back on, we just did what we did, connected it right next to it, saved us a bunch of time. I kid you not, I haven't done anything more to the Jeep, and now we're able to hit like 75 miles an hour, and it's not kicking off like it did before. So I don't know what changed, but it's going above 70 now. I don't get it. See if it stays like this. Fingers crossed. My brother-in-law Andrew just spent a whole bunch of time Googling around, and he noticed before, if you guys saw in the earlier part of the video, that the speedo would kind of fluctuate back and forth, and he found a thing talking about how the, what is it called? The vehicle's VSS, the vehicle speed sensor, which is plugged into the back side of the transfer case, I'll show you guys after, causes an issue. So we unplugged it, which winds up disconnecting it from displaying speed here on the speedo, but in doing that it also tells the ECU that there's a problem when it's fluctuating like that and it cuts out. But now that we've disconnected the VSS sensor, or the vehicle speed sensor, we get this thing up to all sorts of RPM, all sorts of speed, and it does not cut out whatsoever. So I think for real it is finally solved. It was the vehicle speed sensor. Just to show you guys where this is the vehicle speed sensor right here at the back of the transfer case. You can see we just had unplugged it, and maybe it was doing better earlier because I had to mess around with this wiring sensor here heading towards the O2 sensor, and it might have jogged it a little bit, but unplugging this guy is what has temporarily fixed it. So we're gonna get a new one of these and see if it doesn't do better. If it still has issues with a new one, then I'll know it's the actual wiring harness itself. And if it goes away with the new sensor and the speedo is reading good, then it was the sensor all along. But that is really cool. We finally think we found it. So once again, here's this pesky vehicle speed sensor on the Cherokee. We know for sure this is definitely what was causing it before. It was everything else we had evaluated, all the stuff about the fuel, spark, ignition, all that stuff wasn't actually causing the problem. It was this guy right here. So we're gonna pop this guy off. See, everything looks okay here. Just unbolt this little tab that holds it in, pop it out, put our new one in. All right, we're gonna pop out this vehicle speed sensor. Let's see what happens with this. Okay, that looks a lot different, I think, than what we got, but we'll compare. You can see where that gear rides on this other little plastic gear in here, which actually reads out your speed to your speedometer. So this is what it's doing all in one. Okay, I think I see what's going on here. This part here is gonna unbolt, and this white piece is gonna leave the rest of the body, and I think this is gonna go in there and replace it. But now, it does have a slightly different harness, so it comes with its own little harness. The color of the wires still match up to what's here on the existing harness, so I'm gonna have to cut this off and then splice in this new wiring harness, and then this will attach here to the new one because it's a little bit different on the way that it connects, but that should be pretty easy to do. And our suspicions were correct. This little white piece pops out and leaves behind the rest of this body, and then this one here is going to replace it. It's pretty much the same deal, so we're going to put this new one in here, and then we're going to have to wire in the new harness. So we're just going to have to line up. This end has got a little bit of a squared ending. I'm going to get this installed into this housing. Looks like it kind of just presses in. All right, and that shot out this gear on the back end. Let's get this guy back in there. There we go. Okay, and now I can rebolt, realign this little tab right here, bolt this back in. Okay, now it's got a new sensor on our vehicle speed sensor. We'll replace that harness and we should be good to go. The same orange, blue, black, and then a white orange. So I'm just gonna cut these down here, give ourselves a little length on this side, splice the wiring together, and then we can secure this onto the new sensor. And the new sensor, we're gonna put that guy in like this. Sweet. Getting this lock tab put back on, and you can see that it kind of notches in down here, so make sure the orientation this way of the sensor is where it needs to be. Okay, that's back on there. Now let's do some wiring. I've just been going through and reconnecting these wires, splicing them back together. Got these little sleeves that crimp on. My little Eastwood crimp tool. This thing's really good for doing the wiring. Cut all the wires and cut all the sleeves off the wires with the little wire cutter, and just melt on these little covers here. We're good. Sweet. I'll just slip this up here, melt it up, and it'll be good to go. I always like to give the wires a little tug just to make sure that both ends that we just spliced together doesn't have like a loose crimp on one side, so it doesn't pull out later, so it feels tight. Slip this little collar over it, and then we'll get a little fire on there and get it nice and tight. Careful not to melt the original wiring, just enough to kind of get it warm. Far enough. Ideally we're tucked away far enough here that this should never get water in here, but just in case for moisture purposes, I'm gonna put a little bit of dielectric grease on these 3 pin connectors. This way that'll help to retract any sort of moisture or water and keep the pins that come off of the actual sensor from ever corroding and creating a faulty connection in the future. Okay, we're greased up. Let's connect the new harness. Come on. You know you wanna connect. Why aren't you connecting? What's your problem? Go to your home. What's the deal here? There we go. Slipped on there pretty good. Snap in this little locky tab. I don't know if you heard me click it there, guys, but that pushed in. Test it. Doesn't come off now. Okay, that is good. All right, let's go take a test drive and make sure that the speedometer is reading accurately and that we don't have that weird bucking, you know, stalling on its face issue at high speed. Okay guys, test drive. Let's make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing here, Jeep. Let's give it a shot. So far we are reading speed. That's a good sign. At least we know the wiring we did was right. Now we just need to get it up to speed a little bit more and make sure it doesn't do that same problem, but I think we might have got it, guys. Higher RPM was a killer for it before too. Okay. Looking good so far, Jeep. Highway speed, and this thing has been doing great. No more hiccuping, so we fixed it. All right, guys, we did it. It is not stumbling anymore. It's not falling on its face. We are checking out good. So I'm glad we finally figured this out. What a little mystery this was. Hopefully, if you've got the same issue with your XJ, this video helps you too. And yeah, all along it was the speed sensor. After all this work, the Jeep was running like a top. It was actually amazing compared to what it had been when we got it. And I really enjoyed driving it around. We decided to turn it over to some new owners, but it was a million times better than when we had even gotten it.
keep watching. See you guys in the next video.